Let's reveal the answer key, your case study, answer key, a key to a better understanding of the GTR method is here. A key to a better understanding of the GTR method is here. Hello and welcome to your GTR answer key. In this episode, we are talking about the case study called Healing from Betrayal. This was my sixth session with this client, Anna, and this session was noteworthy from two main points of view in my view. The first one was that she finally brought up a memory that I have patiently been waiting for her to bring up. And this is a good example of how sometimes clients do that. And there's no need to pressure them to go into that. But also, it's important to recognize that even though sometimes they would say, yes, they cleared that one, you want to be able to recognize that this might not always be the case, even if they say so. And number two, of course, this case study features something we call the name and protect element. And this is something that we add to the main healing protocols whenever the threat is still ongoing or is somehow still present in your client's life. Delving into present day concerns, goals, and aspirations becomes an integral part of the sessions. This doesn't just ground the client in the present time, but it also helps to disentangle their view of themselves and their lives from being solely trauma centered. The label of trauma and traumatic symptoms is very validating and can help a client make sense of themselves and their patterns, their history, in a way that's very empowering. But at the same time, it's also important for them to start to see the bigger picture of their lives and their potential future, rather than dissecting everything and seeing it all as being connected just to traumatic symptoms. In other words, it's important to normalize the fact that the behaviors and emotions which may come up as part of a client's trauma can also be just a regular part of being human. For example, anger, fear, grief, or frustration, procrastination, conflict, loneliness. All of these can possibly be connected with trauma, but they're also a natural part of life. Having this expanded perspective helps clients to not pathologize themselves every time they feel upset or face setbacks. For example, we see this in Anna and her resistance to showing up more on social media and putting herself out there in business. Now, while her procrastination and fears do tie into her history of complex trauma, these are also very natural things to feel when you're putting your work out into the world and getting more visible. So these feelings are actually a good sign that Anna is taking risks, and they also indicate she cares about her work and she's invested in what she's doing. In this session, we learned that despite clearing traumatic memories over several sessions and having made much progress, Anna still has some hard hitting memories that need to be worked on. Not only does she have memories which are quite layered and complex, but threats of these experiences still create a present threat for her. Her fear of not getting enough business and then not having enough money for heat is not just a past memory, it's a very real, reasonable fear to have right now. We know that in a not so distant past, Anna's ex husband tried to make her out to be an unfit mother, and In one particular instance, her son was manipulated into telling the school psychologist that Anna didn't have enough money to care for the children. And this was then used as evidence for her ex husband and his current wife to try to sue Anna and get the children. Let's now talk about relearning how to assess threat. Because shifting from a trauma only lens is also a crucial step in helping clients to develop deeper trust in their feelings and perceptions. While it's true that trauma can cause someone to have emotional overreactions and to overestimate threat, it's also true that threat, danger, and difficult emotions will still be a normal part of life even when someone has done a lot of healing. In Anna's case, she has a strong tendency to feel she's unsafe, and she often has fear and anxiety come up around the topic of other people and relationships. However, this doesn't mean that every time she feels this way, it's her trauma clouding her perception. In this session, we see that Anna's fear around not being able to earn enough money for heat does have a very real threat attached to it. Like I mentioned, in the past, money issues like this have been used against her as false proof that she's not capable of properly caring for her children, so she's not off base with this fear. It's important for Anna to recognize that even after clearing a lot of trauma, her body can still give her warning signs to keep her safe from possible threat, and she can trust this. A part of Anna's healing journey, and really any trauma healing journey, is relearning how to interpret and assess threat so that she'll be responsive to the present moment rather than overly vigilant or overly trusting. The name and protect element is a vital part of this process for Anna, and it's an empowering addition to the other GTR healing protocols. This process helps clients validate and listen to their body's innate warning system and take action to establish boundaries and protect themselves. The GTR training takes this to an even deeper level in the more advanced modules, which cover helping the client befriend their body and access their body intuition. And of course, this part of the training is not reserved just for our clients. It's also so that we, practitioners, get better at befriending our bodies and better at accessing our own body intuition. One thing to realize is that the client's perception of the memory is not always accurate. And this is what this case study underscored. It showed you how crucial it is for the practitioner to use their observational skills and connect the dots. Anna starts out discussing some of her fears that she feels hold her back in her business. I then find a thread that links these concerns to one of Anna's memories from her emotional freedom plan. Anna has worked by herself on the memory of her son betraying her and has recorded that she brought it from an SUD of 8 all the way down to 0. So in her mind, she had cleared this memory from her system. However, as we have seen before, the client's perception of a memory being cleared or not being bothersome is not always accurate. And this is particularly true when it's a memory that includes a strong freeze response or shock. It took some probing and careful questioning for Anna to recognize that this memory was actually still quite painful for her. By paying attention to both the details of Anna's emotional freedom plan and what she brought up during the session, is what allowed Anna to truly neutralize this memory. It could have been glossed over and missed otherwise. allow me to bring up one more time a point that is covered in your case study guide, and that is that the GTR work is not always about trauma, and that there's a certain chronological factor to the method. If you're working with someone short term, for example, you have 3 GTR sessions with them, and they never had any GTR work done before, then the main focus of your work will be on clearing traumatic memories and emotions. Because your intention is to give the client a good dose of trauma relief so that everything else becomes easier or even possible. For instance, going after what is important to them as opposed to procrastinating and self sabotaging. Now, when working with clients on a midterm and long term basis, the nature and focus of your GTR sessions will begin to gradually shift. It will not be so focused on trauma. The first 2, 3 sessions are usually heavily focused on clearing traumatic memories and traumatic emotions, and you're mostly wearing your therapeutic hat. And then in your later sessions, you're adding some coaching elements to your GTR work, and that is simply because life is happening to your clients. And usually, with those 3 or so sessions completed, they are better enough as to make some shifts in their day to day life in a very practical way. And this might mean that you gently start working on some of their goals. This will help facilitate a grounded, reality based healing for the client, as opposed to one that is so focused on trauma that they cannot see how that healing would translate into their practical life. Of course, at times, more traumatic memories may come up, and you can help the client clear them in this session, or sometimes it's actually completely fine to give them instructions and recommendations to work on the memory by themselves. This would be the case when the client actually prefers to focus on something else in the time that they have with you, for example, goal setting, and they are happy to work on the memory by themselves. So, overall, the longer you work with your client, the more focus of your work shifts from neutralizing traumatic memories and emotions to other aspects of their healing. And you'll learn more about these other aspects in the more advanced modules of the GTR training. But just to give you an example, this might be self care or helping them develop their body intuition, working with their inner critic, or helping them transition from a trauma identity into a life that doesn't involve their identity being tied to trauma. Often you'll want to help them connect with moving forward with their goals, especially when this comes up organically, which it always does as a natural consequence of a person feeling better. For example, in the first part of this particular session, we hear Anna recap the steps she has taken towards launching her online workshop on improving eyesight through the emotional freedom tapping technique. She says she was able to accomplish all the tasks and goals that she had set up for herself when we last talked together. You know, Carl Rogers, the great psychologist and the founder of humanistic psychology, came up with this observation that people are born with a natural tendency to grow and self actualize, and that if they are offered the right environment, which could be the relationship between the therapist and the client, then this natural tendency will start to emerge and unfold. And that's exactly what we see times and times again in working with clients through the GTR method. So you want to support that healthy tendency when it emerges in the client. For instance, Anna has been working rather diligently through her past traumatic memories. And we see this during the sessions that she had with me, but also in between sessions on her own. However, in the 4th and 5th session, we spent time helping Anna establish a better self care practice and help her move closer to some of her goals. No traumatic memories or emotions were cleared in session 4 and 5, but in Anna's 6th session, a memory shows up. one that I have been waiting for a long time. Simply put, peppering the sessions, especially sessions 4 and onward, with some attention on goals, making progress, and helping the client move forward in very practical ways is not only a good way to go, but also something that emerges absolutely naturally once a person releases even just some trauma. Some of the very common symptoms of trauma that one encounters in a coaching practice are procrastination, self sabotage, and something that clients often refer to as stuckness. The client is unable to move forward with their life, with their goals, or with specific areas of their life. And when things start to shift in your client, just like I was describing, you do want to support that. And you don't have to feel like you have to clear memories and emotions endlessly in your sessions. In fact, there comes a point where this would be very counterproductive. Now, you might have noticed that being able to name what's going on for the client emotionally is quite an important feature in several of our GTR protocols and interventions. Of course, there's the emotional release recipe where we name the emotion exactly along with its exact location. When you work with your client on their inner critic, of course, we're trying to elicit what exactly that inner critic is saying and how it's thinking. If you think of writing a therapeutic letter, that's also naming what's going on for the client emotionally. And let alone the finish and complete. We also name what exactly did their body want to do in that moment of freeze. So, by the same token, we see the power of naming in the name and protect element, in that naming the threat is an important piece in releasing the traumatic charge. We can see that as Anna goes through the basic recipe, she begins to release this memory, and afterwards, there are significant shifts in her perception of the event. It feels distant in time, and she perceives another self who experienced it. However, Anna still feels a charge from the event and says that most of her body has relaxed, but she still has fear and shock in her stomach and some of her chest. When I explain how this is not a failure to clear the memory, but actually Anna's body wisdom telling her that she still needs to be on guard, we see this truth instantly click for Anna. She sighs as she realizes this is true, and then again when she admits that her body knows that she still needs to be careful with her son. She knows he's easy to manipulate and that her ex husband and his wife are still a threat and could potentially sway her son again. Once this threat is acknowledged and spoken about out loud, we see a shift in Anna similar to the end of a previous case study. She seems to be in a calm state and she has a well rounded perspective. She's not at either extreme of seeing threat everywhere or being naive. She is able to discuss some strategies and rules to put in place in order to ensure both she and her children are protected. With some guidance from me, Anna decides that she will not share information about money with her son. Then, towards the end of this session, Anna also has some shifts in her understanding of the dynamic with her son. It seems like the betrayal has been affecting how Anna interacts with him without her fully realizing it. She says that he would often point out when she hasn't fixed something around the house, and her habit thus far has been to tell him she hasn't had the money. She seems to feel that she owes an explanation to him, which makes sense after everything we've learned in this session. However, she realizes that Both her son and her daughter frequently point out things she has forgotten to do or instances where she hasn't kept her word. They're teenagers after all, but it's only the situations involving money that make her have her guard up. Now, this is understandable again in the context, but her son would also very likely pick up on her feelings, creating a pattern of strained talks about money. Anna sees that she has been perpetuating this pattern and that it doesn't have to be this way. Money is an issue for her to deal with as a parent, and she doesn't need to involve her son at all. These aha moments are big for Anna. Her memory of getting the lawsuit papers now seems to be neutralized because she finally tuned into the messages of her body, telling her of the threat still being present. With this memory now truly cleared and her insight on how she's been a key factor in the tense conversations about money, it's likely that Anna's dynamic with her son will start to feel lighter. In her clearing of this memory, they've both been released from it. What do we notice about this client in this session? Well, you've probably noticed that she's now moving forward with her goals. She's looking happier. She seems more confident. She is more comfortable expressing herself in the session. We see some evidence of her being not stuck in the freeze mode so much. Her shoulders are more relaxed, her demeanor is generally more laid back, and she also smiles and laughs more and makes more frequent eye contact when she's speaking. She's not doing the deer in headlights look that we've seen in the first couple of sessions with her. Some of her more limiting perspective also shows up in this session. We know that she has started to move forward with her business goals, and she's recently held an online EFT workshop. She says she was only able to get 5 clients, but has been hoping for 10. Now, back to the more limited perspective born out of trauma, Anna is comparing her present circumstance to the ideal where she'd like to be, but not looking at how much progress her workshop represents when compared with her initial position of being stuck and thinking that nothing she did could or would work. She's actually made significant progress, despite how critical she's been of herself. Interestingly, for Anna, when we look at the memory that we worked on in this session, the peak had to do with the moment when she realized that she was really being sued. Once the timeline of events was clarified, we learned that her son lied about her right at the start of the school year, but that she quickly addressed this with him and he told the truth soon after. So, to Anna's mind and sense of the world, this should have been the end of it. She'd been cleared of wrongdoing, and this should have resolved things. How could she get in trouble when her son clarified that she hadn't done anything wrong? This made it all the more shocking when, almost after 5 months, she opened the mail to find the court order, and this was on Christmas Eve, no less. She described freezing very deeply, but her body also shows signs of wanting to fight. She had assumed that the coast was clear, and she has been blindsided. This is a good example of how relational trauma from betrayal can really shake someone's worldview. With this and all the other aspects we know about Anna's life, it's easy to see why she would believe that no one is truly safe and the threat is always lurking somewhere around the corner. This is how powerful interpersonal trauma can be and the all encompassing effects it can have on one's life. being projected onto practically all relationships in a person's life. One of the most common challenges that students mention with this case study is that they're wondering whether they'd be able to carve an event out of Anna's saga. So the comments would go something like this: what I would find challenging is clarifying the details of the memory and getting to the specific part of the event that still holds a charge. I found these series of events to be convoluted and hard to follow the first time I watched the case study with no notes. So the second time around, I wanted to see if it was easier. I still found it a bit difficult. I had trouble keeping the order straight, and Anna goes back and forth quite a few times in her telling of the events. Professor Isabella's repeating of the chronological order in both the case study guides and the actual session was what helped to orient myself. Now, this student was correct in understanding that the strategy that was necessary in order to find the right event for Anna to clear, and also the peak of the memory, was that I was trying to understand what happened in a chronological order. And there are multiple reasons why I try to get a good chronological understanding of Anna's legal battle saga. First of all, obviously, I'm not trying to make sense of the whole saga, but there's so much more. I'm hoping that perhaps somewhere down the line, I'll be able to spot which event in the saga is actually the traumatizing event that needs to be cleared. At the very least, I'm creating a timeline, and I know that the core traumatic event will be located somewhere on that timeline. This will also make my life easier when asking Anna questions to find the exact moment of shock. In fact, when asked further questions, Anna states that when she thinks of the story, she instantly has Christmas in her mind. She explains that getting the sue, as she calls it, on Christmas Eve was a complete shock. Now, this is a client who also values exactness, precision, and detail. So I want to show her that I'm present and listening by giving attention to what she also values and most probably perceives as a sign of being listened to. And finally, by tidying the memory up a bit, I'm helping Anna relax a bit because, as you know, traumatic memories have this fragmentary nature where different fragments of the memory, completely out of order, hijack a person, and it feels like being attacked and ambushed by these fragments coming out of nowhere. And as you can see, as detailed oriented as Anna is, she's giving me fragments of the whole saga in a manner that is not typical for someone who is so detail oriented and so process oriented. It's not effortless for her to gather the pieces of the story in a chronological order. So, in a way, I'm already helping her to heal and release this particular memory, not just by doing the GTR protocol, but by doing this preliminary step of putting things in order, so to speak, to get rid of that powerful fragmentary element that is so typical of traumatic memories. Okay, let me now address another challenge that tends to come up with this case study, and that is students saying that it might be difficult for them to understand that an event needs to be cleared, even though the client says it's down to a zero. Now, in this case, of course, Anna said it's down to a zero after she has cleared it by herself. I did not work on this event specifically with her in our live sessions. To address this challenge that comes up sometimes, let me first read to you a bit from your case study guide. It says, "We know from previous sessions with Anna that she has huge trust issues. And we understand that a big part of those trust issues comes from relationship trauma, where she felt either abandoned and or betrayed by other people. By now you understand that trauma is often the result of the shock resulting from relationships where one felt hurt, betrayed, cheated on, abused, or abandoned by someone else. And this is what we see going on with Anna. As she retells the story, she uses words that speak of trauma caused by a huge sense of betrayal. For example, she says, "They trapped me, all of them together," or "My son was just one part of this betrayal, and it was just one of many betrayals in this whole process. When I think of it, I see a line of people betraying me." And Anna also said, "Each person that could betray me at that time did it." Anna has previously said, "It was painful that my son spoke against me." She said it still hurts, and it hurts like a 6 or 7, and she refers to the SUD level. She also said that as for her daughter, there was no way that they could manipulate her. It was not possible, even though she's younger than Anna's son. Now, in the context of Anna's complex trauma, that it's mostly interpersonal, full of abandonment and betrayal, a betrayal coming from her own child, even if it was not an intentional one, was bound to be a biggie for her. It had that hidden message of, if an innocent child is capable of betrayal, then there's no one to be trusted in this world. Everyone will end up betraying me. So then it just becomes about confirming this hypothesis. This is when I led Anna back to the feeling of betrayal. And Anna admits that she felt like her own child stabbed her. As she says that, she actually performs a bit of a stabbing act with her right hand. And she's smiling at the same time. So, this is a typical freeze response where the client disassociates from the event, and hence there is the smiling while talking about being stabbed. And therefore, she cannot feel the full emotional intensity related to the event. This would be a good example of a moment from the session where you would have to trust your observational skills and know that because of this huge incongruence, this is certainly bound to be a traumatic event. All right, I hope all of this made sense to you. And of course, as always, I hope you've learned a lot in this particular episode of your GTR answer key. And I'll be looking forward to connecting with you again in the next episode. Thank you very much for your attention. Bye for now.